Hello and welcome to this short video about the JPLogistics C152 mod. My name is Joshua and I'm the current author of the mod, along with an excellent gang of beta testers on our Discord channel, which are helping me greatly fine-tune this aircraft to match its real-world counterpart. This video will highlight a few features that the mod has changed compared to the default aircraft, focusing on the version 0.9.3 that you can see on the screen that was just released earlier today, which has quite a few little tiny fixes in it compared to the previous versions. But firstly, I'd like to thank DRF30Q for their work on the initial mod, the C152X. Our mod expands and further develops that mod, so credits to him. The first thing you'll notice is the livery. This is the first time we've included a livery on this mod, and I hope you'll like it. Over the next few releases we're hoping to add several more, as this was quite a highly requested feature, so I hope it satisfies. If you have any suggestions or you want to add any liveries to the pack, just drop me a message on Discord or a message on the Microsoft forums, both of which I'll leave a link for in the descriptions below. So onto the changes. In the original C152X mod, the long-range fuel tanks were added. However, after a collaborative discussion between me and the beta testers on Discord and a couple of people on the forums, we've actually reverted them back to the standard fuel tanks. The reason being is they just took up the extra weight. Not many people would utilize them, as not many of us will do flights over an hour or two anyway on the flight sim. And finally, just not many C152s in the real world that I could find actually used them. Mainly because it's just a small aircraft and you probably wouldn't spend the 7-8 hours that those fuel tanks would give you actually in the aircraft anyway. Further flight model changes, we've addressed several lift and drag issues throughout the aircraft, including the flaps in their various states, the speed on ascent or descent, cruise speeds, the ballooning effect that the flaps cause when you're initially putting them down, and outside, one of the biggest changes is the volumetric lighting mod. The guy who created these is on the forums and on GitHub. I'm not going to try and pronounce his username, but I'll include it in the description below. You should really check out his other work as well. He's done this volumetric lighting for most of the default aircraft now, and it is really spectacular in the late evenings or early morning flights in the fog and rain. It just adds a whole new dimension to the aircraft. The centre of gravity has also been adjusted along with the weight and balance of the aircraft, because the Asobo version was well off, so everything's now nicely proportioned. And at the same time we added two new payload areas. We got forward baggage and the rear baggage. The rear baggage can hold a maximum of 40 pounds. The forward baggage can hold 120 pounds, but if you have anything in the rear, then the combined weight can't be more than 120 pounds in total. So that's just something to bear in mind, otherwise we'll be overweight. The engine has also been updated, so as with the C152X mod, it is the 115 brake horsepower version. It's now been adjusted to a lower RPM at idle, so it reflects the real world equivalents. It now idles around 700 instead of the 900 it was initially. This has helped create a smoother taxiing profile. We don't have to rev it up as much. They've got a lot more control over the steering, and it's just overall just improved the actual ground handling of the aircraft. The P-torque settings have been adjusted, which has helped with the constant right bank issue, or left bank issue, depending on which way your winds were. So you don't have to correct that now on most of your long flights as long as the wind's not too strong, which became a real hindrance once you were getting into your hour and a half long flights. And then moving on into the interior, the biggest change you'll find is, let me just reset my cockpit. Once you turn on your battery switch, the nav stacks will load with their screens off, like so. To turn them on, use the volume/power switches in the bottom left corners. This was reported as a bug multiple times with people not quite sure how to use the radio stacks on the updated versions, but you literally just turn them on there. If they don't turn on, then try flicking on the taxi lights. There's a known issue with a couple of livery mods that if they include the panel.cfg or the panel.xml files with incorrect syntaxes or coding within them, it does cause a conflict with this panel, and that's how you can test that. It's flick on the taxi lights, and if it comes on then that's your issue. We have spoke to a couple of livery developers to try and get this sorted. A couple of them have, and there's still a couple out there that aren't quite compatible with the mod yet, unfortunately, and this isn't really something we can fix from within the mod itself, just because of the way we program things for it. Moving down the display, the transponder screen is still pretty much non-functional, especially for VPilot users for VATSIM. It'll read your squawk, it'll read your transponder ID, but it won't read Mode Charlie or your squawk ident triggers yet. This will come in a later update. There'll be more news on this soon, as soon as the SDK allows it. But for now, at least it'll set your transponder. Moving along, the ADF also spawns in the off position with no screens. This will also make this screen above it useless, so just turn it on with the volume switch beneath it. The ammeter gauge on the right hand side now functions correctly, so this red light below will trigger if the battery isn't charging. To get the battery to charge, just rev up to above about 1000 RPM. That'll push this needle into the positive, this light will extinguish, and we'll have a nice, fresh, fully charged battery in no time. If you start flicking on the different taxi lights, you'll see that the needle quickly goes into the negative numbers, and it'll do the opposite once the engine's up and running. The next most appreciated feature, I think, for this mod is the dome lighting. So on the original default, this was really, really bright and obnoxious, especially flying in low light conditions. So once you've removed the yoke, well, hidden the yoke, use this little knob down here to adjust it to your liking, and it just creates a nice little ambient lighting situation within the cockpit, and it makes those late evening, early morning flights a lot nicer. You'll also notice that the default pilot position has been adjusted. It's actually been brought in line with the average person height, so about 5'10", of where you'd actually be positioned in the C152 in real life. So you can see a little bit more of the hood, a little bit less of the underwing, and greater visibility of the cockpit as a whole. The fuel gauges, when the aircraft is banking to the left and right, you'll see these moving about, which will stimulating the fuel sloshing around in the fuel tanks, which is a pretty cool feature. The pitch trim has been adjusted, so it's no longer as sensitive as it was, so it takes that little bit longer to get it to do bigger values. It just means you have finer control over the pitch of the aircraft, and I know I used to struggle to swing it a little bit too hard, and the aircraft pitched up really heavily, so that's been addressed, and that matches the real world versions now. All these screens have also been adjusted. Most of this was done by the DRF30Q. A couple of them have been updated since to make them smoother or to correspond with their radio stacks turning off correctly. The buttons along top, so channel 1, channel 2, they both switch, and all the nav and ADF switches now all work correctly. Clicking both, you'll receive both channels ATC communications, even on VPilot, which is useful if you're listening to the ATIS and trying to keep an ear out for your delivery controller. Just remember to turn those off. Selecting mic 1 or mic 2 will select which comm you'll transmit over. You can't transmit over both, that's only for listening. And the other biggest change is with this livery, you'll also get a freshly modified interior with a nice blue wooden panel. and these will be individual to each of the different livery packs that we create. So we hope you like this new mod. As I said, version 0.9.3 got released earlier today, so please take that out for a spin and give us feedback on the forums or on Discord, both of which the links are in the description. Yeah, any feedback that you have, things that you'd like to see, suggestions or issues that you encounter. And we hope to see you in the sky soon. Thank you.